Hi, I'm Mike from 1A Auto. We've been selling auto parts for over 30 years.
Going to break the wheel free. I have the vehicle with the weight of the vehicle on the tire, and this vehicle has a wheel lock key. So that's what a wheel lock key looks like, if you don't know. And you line up the little squiggly lines internally. I'll just spin it till it goes right there. 19mm socket, and I'm going to break them all free. I'm not going to take them completely off, not until the tire is up in the air. I'm using a 2-post lift. At home, you can use a jack with jack stands. Now with the vehicle up in the air, I can just use my hands to take the lug nuts off. So I turn the wheel so I have easier access to the back caliper brackets. First thing I'm going to do is take the bleeder screw cover off. Set that aside. I'm going to spray a little rust inhibitor spray in there because I've got to open that bleeder screw. Let's see if it breaks free. Nice. So now I'm just going to let it just snug it because I'm going to open it up later. 14mm socket or wrench to take the caliper slider bolts off. Break that free. I'm going to break the top one free. Let's see if we can turn them. Here we go. Now I'm going to take the caliper off of the actual bracket. There we go. Dual piston caliper. I'm going to take my caliper tool that pushes the piston back. Ratcheting tool. You can use, if you have to use a pair of locking pliers or pliers, just put the old brake pad in the actual spot against the pistons here so that you can pry against that so it pushes the pistons, both pistons back equally at the same time. So never push the piston back without the bleeder screw open if you have an ABS system. That's why I broke that bleeder screw free before. Now I'm going to open that up and aim it at my drain bucket I got down below. I'm going to ratchet these pistons back. I'm also checking out the feel of the caliper. Make sure I don't have any piston drag, frozen pistons, or leakage. The dust boots seem to be nice and dry, so that tells me I have no seal seepage. And the fluid condition. This car has around 65,000. The fluid's pretty clean, but before I add fluid to the system, I am going to check it with my brake battery operated tool I bought from 1A Auto, and it will check the moisture level in the brake fluid. Now I can close that bleeder screw. I'm going to grab a bungee cord and I'm going to set this caliper aside. I don't like to let the flex hose take any pressure and let it hang down. It's not common practice. I'm just going to use the coil spring and let that dangle right there. There we go. Now I'm going to take the caliper bracket off the knuckle, and the 2 mounting bolts are a 17mm socket or wrench. So a socket won't clear the strut bolt, so I'll have to use a wrench on the top. Just grab the bracket, slide it off of the rotor. With the pads still in the bracket, you can see the wear, how far down they are. They're probably at 4 seconds and 3 seconds. Now I'm going to spray the rotor surface where it mounts on the hub let that soak. I don't know if you know, and maybe you do, maybe you don't, but if you've ever seen rotors with threaded holes like this, and you're wondering what they're for, manufacturer puts them in there so you can take a bolt. In this particular case, most of them are 8 by 125 pitch bolts. And they get rusty from sitting, obviously, on the rotor and in the weather. So just hand start them. And what this does, it acts like a puller and it pushes against the hub. So I've got a 13mm socket. And I'm gonna slowly turn that in until it hits. And you just go back and forth evenly. If you don't have a hammer or the hammer's not working, sometimes this will strip. We're replacing our rotors, so it doesn't really matter, but I wanted to show you what those are for and how they work. Here it comes. Now I've done no damage to the surface of the rotor or to the hat. If I'm reusing this rotor and I needed to take it off to do a wheel bearing or any other repairs behind, makes it be able to be reused. And just remove them after you remove the rotor and I like to keep them, so this will be another tool in my toolbox. So now I'm going to take the pads out of the caliper bracket, and I just take a hammer, or in this case my pry bar handle, pop them out. Now when I do left to right, you know, brakes, you driver's side, passenger side. In this case, we always do them in pairs. So at home, if you're doing them, do one side at a time. I like to keep the pads that I took off on that side. So when I go to reinstall the second set of pads, I make sure that the tensioner springs or any pad indicator wear sensors are going back in the same exact way the factory shipped it. There is a science to that. It has to do with the rotation of the tire, where the indicator mounts. You can put it on the wrong side. You won't notice the performance, but as far as the angle of the wear and the indicator for you, the manufacturer puts it in a certain spot for a reason. Here we have our new brakes from oneauto.com and these rotors and pads. And here is the factory rotor and pads for the Subaru. They are so identical, it's actually kind of crazy. So I'm really liking these pads from Auto. I mean, the clips are identical. Obviously you can see the thickness. I mean, this is worn. This pad might not have come with the cut down for the cooling of the pad and the anti-squeak noise. It does have the cutout for the cooling also. The rotor is kind of really cool here. It comes balanced. You'll see the balancer. That's right. That's perfect. That's what you want to look in a quality rotor. Make sure they're balanced. Here's the factory rotor. You could count the fins, and the exact same amount of fins are in the factory rotor as it is in the 1A rotor. The hats are the same design, both sides. And the dismounting screw holes that I showed you how to use earlier. If you need these parts or any other parts for your car, click on the link below and head on over to oneauto.com. Now I'm going to clean up the hub surface before I put my new rotor on. I take a wire brush and just work it. See, look at this. See? Nice little. You want a clean surface so that you have zero pulsation. You want it to line up correctly too. And believe it or not, that will help on pad wear for the future. So just clean up really best you can. Now I'm going to clean it with some parts cleaner. Get all that rust off. Make sure it dries. Now with it all clean and dry, I'm just going to apply a thin coat of anti-seize around where the hub and the rotor meet. Stop the rust buildup. And then I'll just do a little thin coat all the way around. So I just set the new rotor on the hub so that I can clean off the packaging oil with some parts and brake clean. So before I place my rotor on, I want to pay attention to the old bolt markings for the holes where you use the bolt to pry the rotor off the hub. And I want to reline those up that way because that's an indent in that hub and I don't want it to cause a brake pulsation. So now I know that that's where the old holes were for the bolt holes, and it just saves me from the possibility of a brake pulsation. Now I'm going to put a lug nut on the bottom just to stop the rotor from completely popping off so I can line up the bracket easier. Now it comes time to clean the caliper bracket, and I'm going to clean the tins with them still in on the outside. It's easier for me to hold it. Take a wire brush, and I'm going to just brush away any rust buildup that I can see and the brake dust buildup. And then I'm going to take it off and do the same on the back side of it. This is to help with all braking and premature wear. So now I'm going to take this tin off. I just use a pocket screwdriver, pry it up. There we go. Now you see the surface? See the chunks of rust underneath there and on the back side? You want to get rid of those. It's kind of important because that will build up pressure and push the pads up. So then the pads won't slide properly when you let the caliper off, the pressure off. You want those pads to slide back so they don't wear premature. Sometimes you'll see brake pads that are worn at an angle, and that's usually because they're not sliding properly. Now I'm just going to take a brush and quickly brush the back side of these tins. I personally like to buy the hardware for the caliper if I'm using the caliper. I don't sometimes so that I can show you guys. I knew that this hardware looked like it was in good shape. It wasn't dented, it wasn't over rusted. But for the few dollar difference, it's kind of worth sometimes just getting the hardware. It's less labor involved also. I don't know about you, but I'd rather be inside watching a football game. So now I'm going to take the caliper grease and I'm going to put some grease underneath the caliper bracket so I can stop the water buildup and rust buildup. Just a real thin coat. I'll snap it back into place. There you go. So the last thing I'm going to do is take the caliper slider off, and I'm just going to take the pin out, clean it up, examine the slider boot for any tears. So you want to pull it like an accordion, make sure there's no tear marks, and there isn't. It's perfect. Now I'm going to take some new caliper grease. You don't want to glob it, but you just want to coat the inside there. Sometimes it will work its way down in there. If it doesn't, then coat the pin. I just do a quick thin coat and then put some on the inside. See how there's already some in there? That's fabulous. That's the manufacturer. I'm just going to add to that. Reattach this boot to the caliper. Install my pin. I just like to spin it down in a plunger style. It works any air out. Now I'm going to do the same thing to the other side of the caliper bracket. So now I'm going to install the new pads on the bracket that I just cleaned, and this is why I like to keep the old pads per side as I do brakes. So I can see that the one with the indicator, so you have the brake indicator right there, that went on the inside pad because there's the markings for the caliper piston. So now I know that the inside pad is where the bolts are, and I'm going to put my new brake pad right in there. Now this spring is exactly what that is. It's a spring. It's an anti-rattle clip. So let's put that in this angle. Okay, see how I put that clip in first? You want that to have pressure up against inside that bracket, so it acts like a spring to keep this from chattering, making a rattle sound. I'm gonna put the outside pad on. And like I said, I kept the pad, so I know that the anti-rattle clip for this side is there. So same thing, slide that in first, then bring the bottom one down, put it right in. Now I'm ready to install. Now I can slide it in there and line up the bolt holes to the bracket on the knuckle. Just gonna hand thread them. The torque on the inner bolts is 88.5 foot-pounds, and this is a 17mm socket. So I'm gonna get my torque wrench and torque it down. So I've got my torque wrench set up, and I'm just gonna torque it right down. See if I can get on that top one. Now I'm just going to grab the caliper that I placed up there, grab my bungee cord out of the way. Place it on the pads. Just going to push the slider pins back a little bit, make sure it goes on. Then you grab your mounting bolts, put those in finger tight. So now that I've got my caliper bolts, slider bolts down in, I'm going to take my 14mm and torque these to 19.9 foot-pounds. It's not that crazy tight. Last thing I do is loosen up this caliper bleeder screw, and I'm going to just let it gravity bleed because I have opened it and to push that piston back. Dual pistons in this case. Once I see a steady stream of brake fluid and no air bubbles coming out, I'm just going to close that, snug it up, make sure it's nice and tight, clean it up, and don't forget to re-put the bleeder screw cap on. That stops it from rusting up. Don't forget to take the lug nut off that we use for support on the rotor. And then we're going to install the tire. Put all 5 lug nuts back on by hand before we lower the vehicle down. And now with the vehicle on the ground and the weight of the vehicle on the tires, I'm going to torque these lug nuts to manufacturer's specs, which is 89 foot-pounds. I'm going to do it in a star pattern. Last check. Don't forget to take your lock key off. Now I'm going to pump the brakes up. Without the car running, should take like 3 or 4 pumps. You'll feel it stop at a nice solid space. Now I'll check our fluid. Here's our master fluid. Now before I take that brake master cover off, I want to take all that dust and kind of brush it off. I don't want that going inside the brake fluid. You want to always keep your master cylinder, your brake fluid, as clean as possible. You don't want debris. So before I take the cover off, I can see here that it does tell me what kind of brake fluid. It says .3, so I make sure I have that style. Take the cover off. This is where I can check for moisture too, to see if I need to do a brake flush. So we have this nifty tool here from 1A Auto. It'll indicate the water percentage inside the brake fluid. It's battery operated. You have a button on the top, so once you put the 2 prongs in the fluid, just press the button and it will tell me that it's in the okay. It's around 1%. So we have some more mileage to put on before we need to do a brake flush. So my fluid level is full, it's right at max. So that means I don't need to add any. I'm just going to lock my cover back on. I'm ready to go.
Thanks for watching. Visit us at 1AAuto.com for quality auto parts, fast and free shipping, and the best customer service in the industry.